As we settle in to explore the brave theories that shaped a golden age, remember that this was all born from a simple, powerful command: read. So, in that spirit of curiosity, I invite you to share what you're most curious to learn about. What question about the ancient world brought you here tonight? Let us know. In the stark, windswept deserts of 7th century Arabia, a revelation erupted that would forever reshape the destiny of human thought. It was not merely a call to worship, but a profound command to know. The very first word revealed was not pray or obey, but read, Iqra. In the centuries that followed, this divine imperative ignited an intellectual firestorm that swept from the markets of Baghdad to the palaces of Cordoba. This was the Islamic Golden Age, an era when philosophers, scientists, and theologians, armed with unwavering faith and fearless reason, dared to ask the universe its most daunting questions. They did not see a conflict between the mosque and the rumen, laboratory, between the Quran and the cosmos. Instead, they embarked on a grand, unified quest for truth, developing theories of existence, light, motion, and creation so bold and so brilliant that they would lay the hidden foundations for the modern world. This is the story of their brave inquiries, of a universe understood not as a mystery to be feared, but as a divine text to be deciphered. The epicenter of this revolution was Baghdad, the magnificent capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. Here, in the 8th century, the Caliph Al-Ma'mun, a man possessed by a voracious intellectual curiosity, had a recurring dream. In it, the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle appeared to him, radiating wisdom. This vision cemented in the caliph's mind a divine mandate, to gather all the knowledge of the world, regardless of its source. And so, he founded the Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. This was not merely a library. It was a colossal engine of translation and innovation, a direct heir to the Dream of Alexandria. Scholars of every faith, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Sabian, were paid in gold, their weight for the weight of the books they translated. The works of Plato, Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Galen were sought out from the far corners of the Byzantine and Persian empires, translated from Greek and Syriac into the vibrant new lingua franca of science, Arabic. This was the first brave theory in action, the theory that truth is universal, that it transcends the boundaries of language, creed, and empire, and that the pursuit of it is the highest form of devotion. The House of Wisdom became a crucible where the logical rigor of Athens was fused with the revelatory truth of Mecca, creating a new, potent alloy of understanding. From this fertile ground emerged one of the most courageous and contentious intellectual movements in Islamic history, the Mu'tazila. These were the brave rationalists, theologians who championed the primacy of human reason. Their foundational theory was as simple as it was radical. Because God is just and wise, he acts in accordance with a rational, discernible order. Good and evil are not arbitrary decrees from God. They are rational categories that the human mind, a gift from God, can independently comprehend through reason. Revelation, they argued, confirmed what reason could already discover. This belief in a rational universe led them to their most famous and dangerous theory, the created Quran. The Quran, they posited, was the eternal, uncreated speech of God in its essence, but its physical manifestation, the words recited, the ink on the page, was created in time. To believe otherwise, they argued, was to risk associating a second eternal entity with God, compromising his absolute oneness, his tawhid. This was not just an academic debate, it was a battle for the soul of Islam. For a time, under Caliph al-Ma'mun, this became official doctrine, enforced by a period of intense inquisition, the Mihna, where scholars were tested on their belief in a created Quran. It was a stark, and many would say tragic, attempt to impose a philosophical theory through state power, a warning that the marriage of reason and authority could become a tyranny of its own. Yet, the Mu'tazila's brave rationalism, for all its political pitfalls, unleashed an unstoppable intellectual energy. It fostered an environment where questioning was not just permitted, but encouraged as a religious duty. This spirit animated the work of the first great Islamic philosopher, Al-Kindi. Living in this vibrant 9th century Baghdad, Al-Kindi boldly declared, "We must not be ashamed to acknowledge truth from whatever source it comes to us, even if it is brought to us by former generations and foreign peoples." He saw the Greek philosophers not as pagans to be rejected, but as partners in the universal quest for truth. His great theory was one of synthesis. He worked tirelessly to reconcile the seemingly contradictory worlds of Aristotelian philosophy and Quranic revelation. For Al-Kindi, God was the first cause, the necessary, uncaused existence from which all other contingent beings flowed. The universe was a vast, interconnected hierarchy of causes and effects, all ultimately traceable back to the One. He theorized that the human soul was an incorporeal, spiritual substance, distinct from the body, capable of apprehending universal truths. This was a direct engagement with the Greek tradition, but he filtered it through an Islamic lens, arguing that the soul's ultimate happiness lay in its reunion with the divine. Al-Kindi's work was a brave first draft of a comprehensive Islamic worldview, one that dared to use the tools of the ancients to build a deeper understanding of the Creator and his creation. He set the stage for a philosophical conversation that would grow ever more sophisticated and daring, as the torch of reason was passed to even greater minds. As the 9th century waned, the intellectual torch passed from Al-Kindi to a thinker of even greater systematic ambition, Abu Nasr al-Farabi. Known as the second teacher, second only to Aristotle himself, al-Farabi embarked on a project that would dwarf the efforts of his predecessors. He sought not merely to reconcile faith and reason, but to construct a complete and unified system of reality, a grand theory that explained everything from the emanation of the cosmos to the ideal structure of human society. His vision was breathtaking in its scope and bravery, proposing a universe that was both rationally ordered and mystically profound. Al-Farabi's foundational theory, which would become a cornerstone of Islamic philosophy, was the doctrine of emanation. Rejecting the simplistic idea of creation from nothing in a single moment, Al-Farabi proposed a universe that flowed necessarily and eternally from the Godhead, whom he called the first cause. This first cause, in its perfect self-contemplation, did not choose to create but rather overflowed with existence, much as the sun must, by its very nature, shed its light. From this first emanation arose the first intellect. This intellect, in turn, contemplated both the first cause and its own nature, and from this double contemplation two things emanated, a second intellect and the sphere of the fixed stars. This cosmic cascade continued, each level of intellect generating the next and producing a celestial sphere, until it reached the 10th and final intellect, which ruled our sublunary world of generation and corruption. This was the active intellect, the source of all human knowledge, and the administrator of the material realm. Al-Farabi's universe was thus a vast hierarchical chain of being, a great symphony of intellects stretching from the divine to the earthly, each playing its part in a perfectly rational cosmic order. This was not a cold, mechanical process. It was an overflowing of divine goodness, a continuous creation where every level of existence participated in the perfection of the One. This cosmic theory had a direct and radical implication for one of the most pressing questions in Islamic thought: prophecy. How did God communicate with his chosen messengers? Al-Farabi provided a breathtakingly rational explanation. The prophet, in his theory, was not someone who received arbitrary messages from a distant God. Rather, the prophet was a unique individual whose intellect had achieved the highest possible level of perfection. His mind was so purified and powerful that it could connect directly with the active intellect, the same source from which all human knowledge ultimately derives. In this state of union, the prophet received pure, abstract truths about the nature of God, the cosmos, and morality. But here was Al-Farabi's genius. He argued that the prophet, possessing a supremely imaginative faculty as well as a powerful intellect, then translated these abstract truths into symbolic language, vivid imagery, and concrete laws that the ordinary masses could understand. The Quran, with its descriptions of paradise, hell, and God's throne, that was thus a political and pedagogical masterpiece. The same philosophical truth, dressed in the garb of metaphor and law, to guide society toward happiness. This theory was incredibly brave. It placed prophecy on a spectrum of human cognitive achievement, making it a natural, if supremely rare, culmination of the human potential for knowledge. It defended the necessity of revealed religion for the masses, while asserting that the elite, the philosophers, could access the same truths through pure reason. This led directly to Al-Farabi's magnum opus of political philosophy, The Virtuous City. For Al-Farabi, the structure of the cosmos was the blueprint for the ideal society. Just as the universe was governed by a single, perfect first cause from which order flowed through a hierarchy of intellects, so too must the ideal city be ruled by a single, perfect ruler, the philosopher-prophet. This individual was the ultimate sovereign because he possessed both theoretical wisdom, gained through his connection to the active intellect, and the practical ability to translate that wisdom into laws and symbols for the people. He was the point where the cosmic and the political met. The goal of this virtuous city was not mere survival or wealth, but the collective pursuit of true happiness, which Al-Farabi defined as the perfection of the human soul through knowledge and virtue. He provided detailed diagnoses of the ignorant cities that fell short of this ideal: the vain city, the base city, the timocratic city, each corrupted by a false understanding of the ultimate good, whether it was wealth, honor, or domination. Al-Farabi's political theory was thus a philosophical caliphate, a brave and utopian vision where the state became the vehicle for the spiritual and intellectual fulfillment of its citizens, guided by a ruler who was both a sage and a lawgiver, a philosopher and a prophet. It was one of the most comprehensive and ambitious blueprints for a perfect society ever conceived, a testament to the boundless confidence of the Islamic Golden Age in the power of human reason to order all aspects of existence, from the highest heavens to the bustling marketplaces of earth. From the grand political vision of Al-Farabi, the stage was set for a mind that would weave these threads into an even more intricate and unshakable tapestry of existence. In the dawn of the 11th century, in the landscapes of Central Asia, a young prodigy named Ibn Sina, known to the West as Avicenna, emerged. His intellect was so formidable that by the age of 18, he had mastered all the known sciences of his time. But his greatest contribution was not merely in mastering knowledge, but in reconstructing the very architecture of reality itself. Faced with a philosophical crisis, a deep confusion over the nature of being, Ibn Sina retreated into intense contemplation, and from this solitude he emerged with a theory so fundamental and powerful that it would reverberate through centuries of both Islamic and European thought: the radical distinction between essence and existence. Ibn Sina observed that when we consider anything, a horse, a tree, a mountain, we can conceive of what it is, its essence, without knowing whether it actually exists in the world. The essence of a horse is a set of characteristics, a four-legged, neighing, grazing animal. This concept is clear in our minds, but whether such a creature actually exists out in the world is an entirely separate question. From this simple yet profound observation, Ibn Sina built his entire metaphysical system. He argued that for every contingent being in the universe, that is, everything that we can point to its essence and its existence, are two distinct things. Its existence is not a necessary part of its definition. It is something that is bestowed upon it from the outside. A horse's essence does not automatically command its existence. So, what gives it existence? This line of reasoning led Ibn Sina to his monumental proof for the existence of God, the necessary existent. He argued that if every contingent thing requires a cause for its existence, we cannot have an infinite chain of contingent causes. There must be a single, ultimate source of existence, a being whose very essence is existence. This is God, the necessary existent, the one and only being for whom the question, "Why does he exist?" is meaningless, because his existence is inherent, uncaused, and necessary. All other beings are merely possible in themselves and only become actual through the divine bestowal of existence. This was not just a philosophical argument. It was a breathtaking vision of a universe perpetually and dynamically sustained by a single, flowing source of being. With this metaphysical foundation laid, Ibn Sina turned his brilliant mind to the nature of the human soul. Here, he devised one of the most famous thought experiments in the history of philosophy: the floating man. He asked us to imagine a person suddenly created, fully formed, floating in a void, perfectly isolated. This person cannot sense his own body. He has no sight, no sound, no touch, no awareness of his limbs or his heart. Would this person, Ibn Sina asked, still be aware of his own existence? The resounding answer was yes. Even stripped of all sensory input, the consciousness of self would remain. From this, Ibn Sina concluded that the soul is a substance entirely independent of the body. It is not a physical organ, nor a harmony of bodily parts. It is an immaterial, self-aware entity, that uses the body as an instrument. The soul, for Ibn Sina, was a rational spiritual substance that originated in the realm of pure intellect. He theorized its connection to the body was through a mysterious faculty he called the himma, a power of focused concentration that could actually influence matter. The soul's journey did not end with the body's death. As an immaterial substance, it was immortal, destined to return to the world of intellect, its ultimate happiness or misery determined by the knowledge and virtue it had acquired during its earthly life. This was a brave and comforting theory of the self, affirming the dignity and eternal nature of the human spirit. Ibn Sina's genius also extended to a theory of knowledge that was as revolutionary as his metaphysics. He proposed that the human mind does not truly create new knowledge from scratch, nor does it simply passively receive it from the senses like a blank slate. Instead, he argued for a theory of abstraction and illumination. The senses provide the raw data, the particular image of a tree. The internal faculties of the soul then work upon this data, stripping away the material, accidental qualities to abstract the universal form of treeness. But the final, crucial step required contact with a transcendent source of intelligibility, the active intellect, the same 10th and final intellect from Al-Farabi's cosmic hierarchy. It was the illumination from this divine intellect that actualized the universal concept in the human mind, transforming a potential understanding into an actual one. In this moment of comprehension, the human intellect temporarily united with the active intellect, a state of pure intellection that was, for Ibn Sina, the highest form of human happiness. This theory beautifully wove together the empirical, the rational, and the mystical. It explained how fallible human senses could lead to certain universal knowledge, and it positioned the pursuit of science and philosophy as a spiritual act, a journey of the soul back toward its divine origin. Ibn Sina had constructed a complete system from God to the cosmos to the human soul that was so coherent and powerful it would dominate intellectual life for centuries. A brave and majestic cathedral of thought built upon the unshakable foundation of the necessary existent. The majestic, rational cathedral, built by Ibn Sina, did not stand unchallenged for long. A formidable intellect arose, one who would stare into the heart of this philosophical system and find it wanting, not in sophistication, but in its very capacity to deliver ultimate truth. This was Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, a scholar of such renown in 11th century Baghdad that he was known as the proof of Islam. Yet, amidst his towering academic success, Al-Ghazali was seized by a profound spiritual crisis. He found that the certain knowledge promised by the philosophers, a knowledge that should quiet the soul, eluded him. His logical mind was convinced of the hereafter, but his heart felt no genuine fear of God or longing for paradise. This existential dread culminated in a physical breakdown that forced him to abandon his prestigious position and embark on a decade-long spiritual quest. He had become a skeptic in the most terrifying sense. He doubted the reliability of sense perception and even the fundamental axioms of reason itself. What if, he mused, our minds were wired to accept logical principles that were in fact false? This radical doubt led him to a brave and devastating critique that would shake the foundations of Islamic philosophy to its core. The result of this inner turmoil was his philosophical atomic bomb, The Incoherence of the Philosophers. In this brilliant and relentless work, Al-Ghazali set out to systematically demolish the core claims of the Neoplatonic philosophers, chiefly Ibn Sina, whom he saw as overstepping the bounds of reason and infringing upon matters of faith. He did not attack science or logic. In fact, he championed their use in their proper domains. His target was metaphysics. With the precision of a master logician, he identified 20 central problems in their system. But he focused his most powerful arguments on 3 he deemed heretical. First, the philosopher's claim of the world's eternity. Al-Ghazali argued that reason alone cannot prove whether the world is eternal or created in time. Both are logically possible. By insisting on its eternity, the philosophers were arrogantly dismissing the Quranic account of creation ex nihilo without any demonstrative proof of their own. Second, he attacked their assertion that God only knows universals, not particulars. This, for Al-Ghazali, was pure blasphemy. How could the all-knowing, the all-hearing, be ignorant of a single falling leaf or a whispered prayer? This philosophical God was an abstract, indifferent principle, not the personal, responsive God of revelation. His third and most famous critique was of their denial of bodily resurrection. The philosophers, with their belief in the purely spiritual nature of the soul, saw the Quranic descriptions of physical resurrection as mere metaphors for the soul's intellectual ascent. Al-Ghazali countered that, while the how of resurrection may be beyond our comprehension, its fact was explicitly stated in Revelation. To deny it was to call God a liar. His method was not to prove the alternative, but to show that the philosophers' arguments were not the irrefutable demonstrations they claimed them to be. They were merely unproven assertions, no more certain than the tenets of faith. And in a battle between two unproven possibilities, Al-Ghazali argued, the believer must side with revelation. This was his brave stance, a defense of the God of Abraham against the God of the philosophers, a reclamation of a personal, omnipotent deity from the clutches of a necessary but remote first cause. But Al-Ghazali was not merely a destroyer. After dismantling the philosophical path to certainty, he had to find a new one. His journey led him to the path of the Sufis, the mystics of Islam. After his years of wandering, he authored his magnum opus, The Revival of the Religious Sciences, a comprehensive guide to Islamic spirituality. Here, he laid out his positive theory of knowledge. True, certain knowledge is not ultimately achieved through syllogisms, but through direct, experiential taste talk. It is a form of spiritual cognition, akin to knowing the sweetness of honey not by description, but by tasting it. This knowledge comes from the heart, the spiritual organ of perception within humans, which must be purified through ascetic discipline, devotion, and the remembrance of God. Only then can it become a polished mirror, capable of reflecting divine realities. This led him to his own cosmological theory, a direct response to the philosopher's chain of emanation. Al-Ghazali proposed a theory of occasionalism. He argued that there are no independent secondary causes in the world. Fire does not burn cotton, God does. What we perceive as cause and effect is merely God's habitual custom, or ada. He creates the event of fire touching cotton, and simultaneously, as a matter of his consistent will, creates the event of cotton burning. There is no necessary connection between the two. It is a sequence maintained moment to moment by divine decree. This theory powerfully preserved God's absolute omnipotence and sovereignty over every single atom of the universe at every single moment. Nothing happens by its own power. Everything is a direct manifestation of God's perpetual creative act. For Al-Ghazali, the universe was not a self-running machine, but a continuous, breathtaking performance of divine will. This was his brave new world, a universe where causality was an illusion of habit, where certainty was found not in reason but in spiritual experience, and where the ultimate goal of human life was not to become a theoretical philosopher, but to become a saint who knows God through love, worship, and direct encounter. In the wake of Al-Ghazali's seismic critique, Islamic philosophy faced an existential threat. The grand synthesis of Athens and Mecca seemed to lie in ruins, its logical foundations shaken by the proof of Islam's relentless skepticism. But from the westernmost edge of the Islamic world, from the brilliant courts of Andalusia, a response was being forged, a defense of philosophy so bold and uncompromising that its author would be known to the Latin West as simply the commentator. His name was Ibn Rushd, known to Europe as Averroes, and he emerged not merely as a philosopher, but as philosophy's brave champion in its darkest hour. Ibn Rushd lived in a 12th century Cordoba that was witnessing the slow decline of its intellectual golden age under the conservative Almohad dynasty. Yet, he saw Al-Ghazali's incoherence not as a final verdict, but as a profound misunderstanding of Aristotle and a dangerous capitulation to irrationalism. His mission became the restoration of philosophy to its rightful place as the highest form of human inquiry. His response to Al-Ghazali was methodical and devastating. The incoherence of the incoherence, where Al-Ghazali had sought to show the philosopher's arguments were not demonstrative, Ibn Rushd sought to show that they were. He systematically addressed each of Al-Ghazali's 20 points, arguing that the great theologian had either misinterpreted the philosopher's positions or had failed to grasp the strength of their logical demonstrations. On the eternity of the world, the very point that had so troubled Al-Ghazali Ibn Rushd presented a sophisticated argument that would echo through time. He distinguished between two types of creation: huduth, temporal beginning, and ibda, causal dependence. He argued that reason can indeed demonstrate the world's causal dependence on God, Ibda, that it cannot exist without a necessary existent, but it cannot decisively prove whether this dependence had a temporal beginning, Hudath. Since revelation affirms creation in time, the believer must accept it. But this, for Ibn Rushd, was not a contradiction. It was a matter of different paths to truth for different classes of people. This led to his most famous and controversial theory, the doctrine of the double truth. Though often misunderstood, Ibn Rushd did not argue that two contradictory truths could coexist. Rather, he bravely theorized that a single truth could be expressed in two different modes: the symbolic, metaphorical language of religion for the masses, and the demonstrative, philosophical language of reason for the elite. When scripture appeared to contradict a philosophical truth established by irrefutable logic, it must be interpreted allegorically to uncover its deeper, harmonious meaning. To deny this, he argued, was to risk either rejecting reason or falling into anthropomorphism, both of which were greater threats to faith than philosophy itself. Ibn Rushd's bravery shone brightest in his vigorous defense of causality against Al-Ghazali's occasionalism. To deny causation, he argued, was to make knowledge of the world impossible and to reduce divine wisdom to arbitrary whim. If fire did not truly possess the nature to burn cotton by God's design, then the entire universe became an unpredictable chaos where no experiment could be trusted and no medicine could be relied upon. God, in his supreme wisdom, creates natures within things. He makes fire inherently hot and burning, and these secondary causes are real instruments of his will, not mere illusions. To observe the consistent laws of nature was not to bypass God, but to understand the magnificent, reliable system he had wrought. This was a defense of science itself, an affirmation that the human mind could truly understand the workings of a rationally ordered creation. His theories extended into the nature of the soul and intellect with equal fearlessness. Engaging with one of the most vexing problems in Aristotelian philosophy, Ibn Rushd developed his theory of the intellect. He argued against the individual immortality proposed by Ibn Sina. Instead, he posited that, while humans possess a passive, material intellect that receives forms, the active, abstracting intellect is a single, transcendent entity, one for all humanity, akin to Al-Farabi's active intellect. Upon death, the individual's material intellect, with its unique experiences and knowledge, dissolves. What survives is not a personal self, but the universal, acquired intellect, the pure knowledge one has accumulated, which rejoins the transcendent active intellect. This was a philosophical conception of immortality, a merging with the universal mind rather than a personal continuation. It was a theory that prioritized the eternal value of knowledge itself over the persistence of the individual ego, a brave and startling conclusion that would both inspire and horrify later thinkers in equal measure. Ibn Rushd's project was the last great systematic attempt in classical Islam to fully harmonize philosophy and revelation without subordinating the former to the latter. He represented the brave, unyielding voice of reason, arguing that to forbid the study of philosophy was to contradict the Quran's own command to reflect upon creation. He died in philosophical disfavor, his works largely ignored in the East and eventually suppressed in the West. But his legacy was smuggled into Europe, where his commentaries on Aristotle would ignite the intellectual fires of the Latin Averroists and influence thinkers from Thomas Aquinas to the architects of the scientific revolution. In the end, Ibn Rushd stood as a tragic, majestic figure, the last great defender of a rationalist tradition, who believed until his final breath that the love of wisdom and the love of God were not two paths, but one. While Ibn Rushd mounted his formidable defense of Aristotelian reason in Cordoba, another, more mystical revolution was unfolding in the same Andalusian hills. This was the path of Irfan, or Gnosis, led by the towering figure of Ibn Arabi, who would become known as the greatest master. Born in Murcia in 1165, Ibn Arabi's philosophy was not built on logical syllogisms, but on visionary experiences of breathtaking scope. His was a brave theory of the heart, a cosmology of love that presented the most radical and all-encompassing vision of unity ever conceived in the Islamic world, the oneness of being, or wahdat al-wujud. For Ibn Arabi, the entire cosmos was nothing but the self-disclosure, the tajalli of the one divine reality. God, in his absolute, unknowable essence, the hidden treasure yearned to be known. And so, he brought the universe into existence as a mirror to behold his own beauty. Every atom, every star, every human heart was a unique and finite manifestation of God's infinite names and attributes. The world was not a creation separate from God. It was his theophany, his self-expression in countless forms. This was not pantheism, the belief that God is the universe, but panentheism. The universe exists within God, who simultaneously transcends it. A single, divine breath, the breath of the all-merciful, sustained all that is. This theory was the ultimate brave synthesis. It dissolved the perceived duality between the creator and creation, between the transcendent and the immanent, into a sublime dynamic unity. This vision led Ibn Arabi to a revolutionary theory of the perfect human, or al-insan al-kamil. Humanity, for him, was the microcosm that contained the macrocosm. The human being, possessing both a spiritual and physical nature, was the unique bridge between the divine and the created orders. The perfect human is the one who has realized their true nature as this comprehensive mirror reflecting all of God's names perfectly. They are the vicegerent of God in the fullest sense, the point where the universe becomes conscious of itself and its Lord. For Ibn Arabi, the prophets and saints were the prime examples of these perfect individuals, with Muhammad representing the seal of the blind. Saints, the ultimate archetype of this complete realization. This was a theory that bestowed immense spiritual dignity upon humanity, framing the entire spiritual path as the journey of awakening to one's true identity, as the conscious self-disclosure of the divine. Ibn Arabi's legacy was carried forward by generations of Sufis, but it found one of its most powerful philosophical voices in Persia, with Mulla Sadra in the 17th century. Mulla Sadra, standing on the shoulders of 1,000 years of Islamic thought, dared to propose a final, grand synthesis. He developed the theory of transcendent theosophy, which bravely addressed the very nature of existence itself. His masterwork, The Four Journeys of the Soul, outlined the seeker's path from creation back to the Creator, but its foundation was a metaphysical revolution, the primacy and systematic ambiguity of existence. Mulla Sadra inverted Ibn Sina's schema. He argued that what is fundamentally real is not essence, but existence itself. Existence is a single, intense, and dynamic reality that flows from God, the pure act of being. This single existence possesses systematic ambiguity. It is manifested in different grades of intensity and perfection, from the weak existence of a stone to the intense, conscious existence of a human soul or an angel. This led to his most famous theory, substantial motion. Contrary to Aristotelian physics, which saw substance as static, Mulla Sadra proposed that all of creation is in a state of perpetual, essential flux and becoming. The entire cosmos is a dynamic, living entity, and every substance is constantly evolving along an arc of perfection, moving toward its divine source. The human soul, for instance, is not a finished product. It is born material, and through knowledge and virtue, it literally transforms, becoming more intense, more real, and more spiritual, until it can subsist without its physical body. This was a breathtakingly brave vision of a universe, alive with purpose, where every soul is on a cosmic journey of transfiguration. The legacy of these brave theories is the very world we inhabit today. The experimental method of Ibn al-Haytham laid the groundwork for modern science. The rational disputations of Ibn Rushd fueled the European Renaissance. The metaphysical systems of Ibn Sina and Mulla Sadra shaped the course of philosophy from the medieval schools to the modern era. They proved that faith, when brave enough, does not fear reason, and that reason, when humble enough, can open the doors to transcendent mystery. They taught that the universe is intelligible, that the soul yearns for the infinite, and that the pursuit of knowledge, in all its forms, is a sacred duty. This grand conversation, which lit up the world from Baghdad to Cordoba, now passes to you. The command to read echoes across the centuries, an invitation to explore, to question, and to understand. The story of these thinkers is not a relic of the past. It is a living tradition of intellectual courage. And now, we turn this journey over to you. What theory captivated your mind? The rational cosmos of Ibn Sina? The spiritual experience of Al-Ghazali? Or the unifying vision of Ibn Arabi? Continue your own exploration. Dive into our other documentaries on the thinkers who shaped our world. Subscribe to History and Knowledge, and join us as we keep unearthing the profound ideas that illuminate the human story. The pursuit of knowledge is a never-ending journey. What will you discover next?